So, Peter,
Thank you,
all right.
Dr. Bessent.
Yep.
How long until we see your signature next to President Trump's face on a $250 bill?
Well, again, as Treasury Secretary, I have two mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on a $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of the, it's all up on Capitol Hill. So at Treasury, we prepare things in advance. So we have prepared in advance that if the legislation is passed, but we will stick to the law.
Now this is where the story gets interesting. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the government has already prepared a design for a possible $250 bill featuring Donald Trump, but only if Congress approves it first. Supporters are calling it a patriotic tribute tied to America's 250th anniversary, while critics say putting a living president on U.S. currency would break a long-standing tradition. Either way, the proposal is already creating major debate online and across Washington. And honestly, whether people love it or hate it, the idea is definitely getting attention. But here's the real question. Would you support a $250 bill with Trump's face on it? Drop your opinion in the comments and follow for more breaking stories and viral updates.
Family, all the employees, and that's how we got here now. No American should be targeted for political reasons, and every citizen deserves fair treatment and full protection of the law. The Department of Justice represented Treasury and the IRS in this matter, and I'm going to have to refer any questions to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for taking the time. President Trump at the cabinet meeting said he thought that reducing fraud would help to balance the budget. You put out the goal of getting the deficit to 3% of GDP. What's your timeline for achieving that? And how do you think what can you say to make the markets, given where rates are, like kind of process kind of what your plan and agenda is?
Well, the GAO numbers, not my numbers, believe that there's about $500 billion a year of fraud. So could we very quickly get 250 billion of that? The budget deficit is approximately 1.8 trillion. So that would reduce the deficit substantially. If we could get that 500 billion number, I think it would engender confidence. You'd probably also go into a virtuous cycle. As the budget deficit narrowed, interest rates would go down. No one reports it, but last year we actually had a fiscal contraction. Just to remind everyone, we inherited the worst budget deficit in history when we were not in a recession or not at war, 6.7%. We brought that down to about 5.5 or 5.4% this year. I think we can stay on a good trajectory.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. On the $250 bill, Mr. Secretary, you said the legalities of it are up on Capitol Hill, but I just wonder what your opinion is personally. Do you think it's a good idea for the president to put his face on America?
Again, the president doesn't do it. The House and the Senate have to do to it.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I have two questions for you, but just to follow what you said about the
Well, you didn't call me doctor, so I only get one.
Well, I'll shoot for two. You said that it's up to Congress if the president's face is on a $250 bill, but it is actually the Washington Post that's reported two political appointees from the Treasury Department who have asked agencies to be ready to do that. Do you think politically it's a good idea to put his face on a $250 bill when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
I don't really understand this Washington Post article. That who hears from the Post? Yep. Terribly written, terribly edited. Because basically what it says is that Treasury is following the law and that we've created the bill and that it's up to Congress, but that we follow the bill and it's up to... I didn't really understand what the story was.
So
but anyway...
appointees aren't involved in that, two of your political appointees?
Yeah, of course, but we prepare for everything if it gets passed. Just like we were ready 6 months in advance for the one big beautiful bill for tax guidance. So we have to prepare in advance. You can't draw something up the day before.
Politically, do you think it's a good idea though when people are struggling to afford gas and groceries?
Look, I think it has. I think that it's bifurcated. Do you think we should have a 250th anniversary the celebration?
Well, that's happening anyway, but putting the
But no,
president's
no, no,
face on a $250 bill
no,
is
no,
a
no, no,
choice.
but Caitlin, it's not happening anyway. It's happening because it's being funded by private citizens, by the federal government, by state governments, by municipal governments to celebrate our country. And I don't think that there's anything untoward about having the President of the United States, the person who was President of the United States, on the 250th anniversary bill.
On
Russia
sanctions.
sanctions.
What you just commented on there, Mr. Secretary, about the $1.8 billion fund.
The-
Is it accurate that the general counsel of the Treasury Department resigned over that?
I will not be taking any other questions, I will not be taking any other questions.
But you know, Wall Street over here.
So,
On the sanctions, sir, given the scale of the assault from Russia on Kyiv in recent days and the fact that diplomacy seems to have settled down, there is no diplomatic talks happening right now between Russia, Ukraine, or the U.S. What about sanctions? Is the U.S. considering sanctions on Russia at this time?
well, the U.S., this administration has put the hardest sanctions on Russia of any country. So let's review how the sanctions regime has gone since the Russian action on Ukraine. Biden administration put on what I would call mild sanctions because they were worried about gasoline prices going up into an election. It would be an unstatesmanlike sanctions. Probably the worst national security advisor in the history of the country, Jake Sullivan, in an act of bravery on his way out the door in January, raised the sanction level on behalf of the Trump administration. We let those in situ when we took office. Fast forward to October, and President Trump instructed me to sanction the two largest Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, which we did. No other government has done that. So no one has done more sanctions than the Trump administration on Russian oil. Here, who wants to own this? Gray hair. No, gray hair. No, you don't have gray hair. Well, maybe you do. Yeah.
When you had breakfast this morning with Fed Chair, did you request that the Fed lower interest rates?
I had breakfast with Chair Powell 41 times, and I never did that. So, okay, last question.
Governor Gavin Newsom has floated this idea of a 100% state tax on Californians who receive money from President Trump's anti-weaponization fund. Your response to the governor's call for 100% tax?
There's no cure for stupid. Okay. Thank you all.